Choosing your path, physician as a hospital employee, is this the right decision for you? Over the years, the trend has been changing. Early on in the 1980s, physician ownership was around 76%. This is according to a survey from the American Medical Association. By the early and mid 2000s, 61% of physicians were owners. So, as you can see, the percentage has been going down. By 2012, 53.2% of physicians were owners. And by 2022, 44% of physicians were owners and 49.7% of physicians were employees and 6.4% were independent contractors. So this has been a drastic change over the past few decades from physicians owning their own practice or being part owners of a practice to physicians opting to be employees of a big medical group or a hospital group. Physicians often lack the training in the business side of medicine. When I went to medical school, I learned many things in terms of basic science and clinical sciences, but there were no courses in my training about business or how to run a medical business. We were supposed to figure this out on our own. And I think that's still the case. I don't think there's any courses. The time is very limited for training in medical school. And so I don't think there's a lot of time to add business classes or medical business classes. But I think that'd probably be a very good thing to add and will be very helpful to a lot of physicians. Some physicians might be interested in the business side of medicine, but they still feel ill equipped to really run a successful business. And many physicians may not be interested in business at all. You know, if many physicians went into medicine and science and had no interest in business and accounting and all the things related to business. And so in those cases, probably would be a better fit to be just an employee and not having to run a business. It's also important to consider that the E-Myth also applies to physician. And what I mean by that, there's a famous book about the E-Myth, the entrepreneurial myth, and that's that many technicians, meaning people that are good at what they do as specialized tasks, let's say plumbers or electricians or physicians, we can be excellent at that task, at that profession, but that doesn't mean that we're equipped and to run a successful business for that service. And that's often the problem that physicians run into. We spend a lot of our training in trying to be the best physicians in our specialty as possible, but very little training or no training into how to run a successful business delivering those services. Another factor to consider is that excessive confidence might be a disadvantage. In general, I think physicians were very confident because in order to become physicians, we had to do well in school, be top of our classes in high school, college, and you really earn in top grades academically. But that doesn't necessarily mean that confidence should translate into running a business unless we've spent the necessary time to learn about business and how to run a successful business. We're definitely smart enough to learn this, but it has to be learned, and we have to spend the time to learn these skills so we can run a successful business. We're going to go into what are some of the being a hospital employee or a physician, an employee physician. What are the pros of choosing this career path? And this seems to be the career path that many physicians nowadays are opting for. Of course, finances and money is always a big player. And some of the benefits of being an employee physician is that you're going to have a more stable salary and you'll probably have benefits too. And there will be less financial uncertainty. Your salary will be more stable and guaranteed. And you're going to have probably more job security. And not always the case, but for the most part, more job security. The in the Right now there's a big need for physicians, especially my specialty, neurology. So job security, I think, is one of the biggest advantages of medicine right now. Is that there's always going to be a need for physicians. And if you're an employee for a big hospital, you're going to have more financial resources available to you through the hospital, and you'll be more able to weather fluctuations in patient volumes. For example, we recently had a pandemic, and this is shut down a lot of businesses, including private medical practices, and the need for medical services actually went up. And even though they went up, a lot of physicians, a lot of hospitals were suffering because patients were afraid to go to the hospital because they were afraid of being close to patients that were sick with COVID and getting infected. And so that caused a lot of stress for everybody, patients, but even more so, I think, for the medical profession, because we had to take care of our patients, but at the same time deal with all the financial uncertainty of having to run a business during a pandemic. Now, if you're an employee for the hospital, you probably don't have to worry as much about how your next paycheck is going to be paid, because the hospital might be able to weather the fluctuations in patient volume and still guarantee your salary. But if you're if you're running your own private practice and no one wants to go to the doctor because they're afraid of getting COVID, and that could lead to having to shut down your business. And we saw that with a lot of private medical practices that were maybe giving services that were not as essential in a pandemic, like maybe dermatology. I've heard of several dermatology practices shutting down for a few months during the pandemic. And so definitely much more risk when you're running your own business compared to when you're an employee. Benefits in overall is due to, if you're an employee, you're probably an employee of a big medical group or a big hospital network. So they have the benefits of scale, and that leads to probably more comprehensive benefits like health insurance, retirement plans, and paid time off. And I think that's one of the biggest um, benefits, and one of the main reasons why a lot of physicians nowadays want to go work for a big hospital system and be employees, because they don't want to have to take this risk, and they want to have all those benefits without having to take risk. And there's when you're an employee, there's less administrative burden in the sense that you're not having to worry about running a successful business. That's taken care of by the CEO of the hospital and all the administrators. They worry about the numbers and making sure the business is profitable. You just do your job as a physician. So and that could be a benefit. Fewer administrative responsibilities. You don't have to worry that there's going to be a holiday party and how much money is going to be spent, or that you're understaffed. It might affect you if you're in a hospital and is understaffed. That definitely affects you, but it's not your problem to solve. That's the administrators, the human resources department. They have to worry about hiring and paying for the staff to help support your services. So you may have more time to focus on in patient care, and also might have more time for your personal life. When you're part of a big hospital or medical group, you have, of course, the benefits of scale. So you have more access to advanced equipment. The hospital might have MRIs or other equipment to do testing that you need. For example, in my specialty, for example, we, and as neurologists, one of the biggest fields or areas of specialty that is growing, especially in neuromuscular medicine, is ultrasound. ultrasound of nerves, of muscles. That is a growing area and a very promising area because the technology is improving and the quality of the images is getting much better. However, and the problem is that the ultrasound machines can be extremely expensive and the reimbursement for doing ultrasound is very low. So, as an independent practice, it's hard to go into ultrasound of the nerves or neuromuscular ultrasound. But if you are part of a big hospital system, they probably have a bunch of ultrasound machines that they're using to do other types of ultrasounds that can easily be used to do neuromuscular ultrasound. So there you get the benefits of scale and you have access to more equipment. That's just one example. And of course, if you're part of a big hospital system, they have specialized departments. So they have legal departments, they have human resources departments, and you get all the benefits from all those services and access to all those departments. And you have more support staff. Also, from the benefits of scale, a big hospital is going to have um, people that do scheduling, people that do billing, people that do all sorts of clinical tasks and transporting patients and things like that. So you benefit from having access to all those services. When you're part of a big hospital system, you're going to run into other physicians in your specialty and in other specialties. So there's more opportunities for networking and getting to know uh, doctors outside of your area. And that, of course, creates many professional opportunities. Also, being part of a hospital system gives you opportunities to be in leadership within the hospital system or other professional areas that you can apply with your medical degree. So that's something and that could be also a benefit. However, I like to point out that even if you're not a hospital employee and you're just maybe doing call at the hospital, you can still have access to a lot of these same benefits without having to be a hospital employee, just being affiliated with the hospital. Training and development. The hospitals, they're responsible for making sure that their physicians are credentialed and they keep up with their CME. So they often provide. It's very easy for hospitals, to organize conferences for their physicians that are CME accredited conferences. So there's easy access to this type of educational opportunities. And however, just also want to point out that you don't have to be an employee of the hospital to have access to these CMEs. If you're affiliated with the hospital, if you do call in the hospital, they'll probably let you participate in their CME activities. Now, let's talk about the cons of being a hospital employee as a physician. Well, the main one is that you have limited autonomy. You have less control of your over your schedule. You're an employee, so they can dictate when you can see patients and how many patients you have to see. And there might be also limitations to your treatment decisions. You might be limited to whatever is in formulary or uh, whatever is available in the hospital and whatever the hospital wants you to use. You may have less control over. You definitely have less control over who are your colleagues and support staff and management, right? So if you are running your own business, uh, you have a lot of control over who is your medical assistant, who is your office manager, that sort of thing. When you're an employee of a hospital, you can uh, have a little bit of influence over who are the people, who are the CEO, who's the nurses, and but it's much less limited. And I think as I work in private practice, but I do call at the hospital, and that's one of the biggest drawbacks. That when you're in private practice, you can control who you work with, right? So definitely the people that you pay their salaries, you can definitely control who you work with. You can hire and fire, and the people you work that work for you, but also in terms of people you refer to, like there's plenty of doctors doing the different specialties. I can refer to physicians that I think are the best to, if I'm referring to a neurosurgeon or I'm referring to a rheumatologist or other specialties. There's a, many different specialists that I can refer to, but I can try to refer only to the people that work well with me, that I know are really top notch in terms of their specialty, but also are easy to work with, that we can collaborate with and co-manage these patients. And so that is a big advantage. When you're in the hospital, when I'm in the hospital on call, I can't choose who the surgeon is or who the cardiologist is or who are the other specialists involved in the case. So sometimes there might be personalities that are difficult to work with, and you have no control with that. You have to just work with those people. So that I think is a big downside. Also, same thing with the staff. There might be nurses or other support staff that are very difficult to work with, and when you're in the hospital on call, you have to work with whoever uh, is there working. Bureaucracy, of course. Whenever you have a big organization, you're going to have more bureaucracy. Decisions are made a lot slower. uh, when you're in private practice, you just if you need to make a change, you can make it as quickly as you're willing to make it. When you're in the hospital, everything has to go through committees, and you have to ask permission, and it's not ultimately your decision. So of course there's going to be less control over decisions as you can have if you're running your own business. Less flexibility. Hospital schedules may be less flexible. You might not, if you like to, if you want to work certain days, if let's say you want to work some Saturday hours, well, that would be very difficult if you're in the hospital. I'm not advocating that you do that, but, or let's say you like to work late, like till 10 p.m. It's going to be a lot harder to do that being a hospital employee than it would be if you are part of a private practice. And that's not something I do, but I know I've been in private practices where and some doctors prefer to work really long hours and certain days of the week, and they have that flexibility to do that with their schedule. And you may have less flexibility in terms of work-life balance, but at the same time, since you have less responsibilities in terms of administration and running a business, and that might help with work-life balance. Less earning potential. And this is probably a little controversial, but of course, when you're a part of a hospital, you're an employee, and in general, no matter what the business is, employees are going to make less than um, people who own their business that delivers the services. And because whenever you have more middlemen, you're going to have everybody's taking their cut. Everybody needs to make a living. And so, of course, less is going to trickle down to the physicians. So more administrators, more resources, more infrastructure translates into higher overhead and eventually less money ending up as physician compensation. That is usually the case. Sometimes there might be some situations where the physician salary is subsidized in order to meet certain requirements for accreditation. And so the physicians might be earning more than they're actually bringing in terms of revenue to the hospital. And that can happen in some situations, especially with a lot of physician shortages. And that's I think that's made it really hard for private practices to recruit physicians because they're having to compete against hospitals who are not just offering all the security and the benefits of being an employee, but also maybe subsidizing the physician income more than what the physician is actually bringing in. And they may justify it because the physician is allowing them to have a certain type of program and that generates a lot of income, or the physician might make up for that shortfall in the tests that they order within the system, like MRIs and referrals, that sort of thing. High patient volume. In the being an employee, they may be able to mandate that you see more patients than you would want to see if you were running your own business, and you may have less control over the amount of time you spend with patients. And I think a big one, and this is it's something that I'm very into now, is lean methodology and improving the efficiency of the practice. And many hospitals are using lean methodology, but you would have, being an employee, it will be a lot harder to implement lean methodology then but if you're the one who's interested in doing it and you're very motivated, then if you're in private practice you control everything. So that means that you can make, if you're a physician owner, you can make your staff learn about lean and uh, make it important and apply it to the practice. And that's something that if you're an employee, only if the hospital shares your vision for applying lean methodology would that be possible. So you have less control of how efficient you can run your practice and how much value you can offer your patients, because it's not your business. You're an employee in that business, but you have less control over how things are implemented. And for some people that might be a big plus, because you don't want to have to deal with all those implementing lean methodology and improving efficiency. Competition. Sometimes there might be more competition from colleagues in the same specialty, because you don't control if they hire other physicians in your specialty with your expertise. That could create situations in terms that you might get more competition. If you're in private practice, you probably want to influence the additional physicians that get hired into your practice so that they complement what you do and don't take away from what you're doing. Ultimately, it is a very personal decision for early career physicians whether they want to be employees or they want to be part owners or owners of their practice. It depends on your individual preferences. And do you like the business side of medicine? Are you interested? Do you want to learn it? If not, if you just want to do the science and patient care and not interested in the business side, then definitely employee, it makes more sense. What are your career goals? What are your priorities? That also needs to be taken into account when deciding whether you want to be an employee or an owner of your practice. And what is your specific circumstances? Are you in a position to take the risk of owning a practice, or do you need to have more security because of the what you have going on in your life and what you want to achieve? So overall, it's going to be, you want to weigh the stability and resources of a hospital employee versus the autonomy and higher compensation of private practice. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and share with your colleagues. Also, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to continue to post videos like this relating to uh, issues or topics that will be beneficial for early career physicians. I've had 17 years of experience in medicine now, in private practice, so I want to share some of what I've learned so that other early career physicians can learn from it and not make the same mistakes that I did. And if you have ideas for other topics that we could cover, please leave a comment below with any ideas for future videos. Okay, take care. Wish you the best. We need more uh, physicians exercising their medical degrees to help patients, take care of patients, whether it's in private practice or in the hospitals. So I really wish you a lot of success. Your services are very needed and very helpful to patients. Take care.